Hello and welcome to episode 44 of Prosperity by the Pint. This is a podcast where we talk about money, investing, business, and life success, all while having a cold beer. Special episode this week. We have a very special guest. My shorter, goofier brother, Brandon Carter, CFP, is with us.
At least I'm special.
And the beer of the week it's from Firestone Walker Brewing Company. It's their 805. It comes from Central Coast, California. It's an ale, 4.7%. Let's give it a try.
We get to drink now?
We get to drink now.
All right.
He was really, really tempted to have some of the beer before the episode, and that's against the rules. This beer has a good story, too. I'm going to let Brandon share part of the story. Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
That is lovely.
I like that.
That is really good. They know how to make beer in California.
It's crisp.
So the story of this beer and how we actually got this one, and if you're here just for the personal finances, I'm sorry. We're sharing a funny, fantastic story on how we got this beer. So we were in Wyoming hunting, and I'm going to tell my portion, and then you come in.
Okay.
And so we're in Wyoming hunting, and my dad and I dropped my brother and cousin off at a spot, and they were supposed to text us the next day when they're ready to be picked up, but they forgot their device that they use for texting.
But there's no service there, so we had a GPS texting
It's a satellite
device.
phone kind of thing. And so they left that in the truck, so we kept going back and checking for them in case they, were wounded at the trailhead or whatever. And we're in the middle of nowhere. There's on this road that we're on, there's a handful of cabins, and we stopped and we talked to this nice lady, and she was out in front of cabin 5 or whatever, so we thought, she lived in cabin 5. And we left a note for them at the trailhead. Hey, there's nice people in cabin 5. If you guys come down early, go see the nice lady in cabin 5. So they come down from the trail.
Yeah, so when we went up, we got halfway, maybe 3/4 of the way up the mountain, and we realized we forgot the device. And we weren't going back down. So we come out, we get the note, we go up to cabin 5, and I'm dressed in like full camo. I haven't showered in a couple of days. And, I got like face paint on my face and, backpack the size of a human being on my back. And so I go up to their door, and they were super friendly, invited me right in and let me use their phone.
By the way, it turns out it was not cabin. That lady was a different person.
I don't know what cabin it was.
So we sent them to cabin 5 because we thought there was nice people there, and we didn't know the people that were there. It turns out there was nice people at cabin 5.
Yes, they were very nice. Yeah, they let us use their phone. Anyway, we found our way back we actually hitchhiked, and people in Wyoming are extremely friendly. Every truck that passed us offered us a ride. So we got a hitchhiked back to camp and found out that my uncle was out looking for us. And so he happened to go by cabin 5 later on, and they were like, "Oh, hey, we like your nephews. Here's some beer and some food for them." And this was some of the beer that they had given them. So they took back to camp.
Yeah, some random strangers that helped gave them a random bag of goodies. And this was the beer, and it is fantastic.
It is very good. It reminds me of like a Stella, but a little bit more flavorful.
Yeah, it's an ale, but it's not hoppy. It's good.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd have Brandon on, and I wanted to talk about just kind of fundamental business practices. Brandon has started several different businesses and has been a part of a really great story of growth of our business, which is Financial Strategies Group, and kind of the challenges that you come across. So I guess just start by kind of giving us your backstory on getting into the business and some of your other adventures, like, your foray into real estate.
Sure, yeah. So I went to college and at CMU and did the entrepreneurship program, which is a really cool program where they give you lots of different aspects of business, from marketing to accounting to finance, and everything in between. And so that was really cool. I always knew I wanted to be in business, and my emphasis was in finance. I ended up my dad talked me into doing an internship with him, and I still don't know to this day whether he planned this or not. But the first couple of meetings that I sat in with him and his clients were, it was a very emotional situation, loss of loved ones, and they were just extremely grateful for the job that he had done to help their parents. And there was a situation where parents were going into a nursing home. And so it was just a really cool experience to see how you could make a good living and help people at the same time. And basically from that moment on, I was decided I want to be part of the business and the family business. And when I started in 2008 full time,
I think it was planned because the first couple meetings I sat in were all emotional too. And it's like, first 3 meetings I sat in with Dad, I think people cried, and like that's happened like twice with me since in the 10 years since, right?
Yeah. Well, apparently they're paid actors.
Yeah.
So I started in 2008, and it was me, Dad, one full-time assistant, and one part-time assistant.
So you got 4 bodies in the room.
4 bodies, and we just rented a smaller office.
2008, right?
2008. So this was right before the crash.
Yeah.
I started being involved in internships in 2006, but by the time I was there full time, that was about what it was. And then from them today, flash forward, I think we're at 15 employees and 7 advisors. And so it's been definitely a journey along the way.
Yeah.
We've gone, and now we own our own 3 different offices. 2 of them we own, 1 we still rent.
And we went from being affiliated with a much larger entity to being registered directly with the SEC ourselves, and went through those challenges, which is we could spend hours talking about that alone. But that doesn't really encompass the components of what we're trying to get through today. Some of those challenges you have as a business owner and I remember early on, maybe it was your 3 or 4 years in, you hired your first assistant.
I did, yeah,
to help you, and ended up having to fire him.
Yep.
And so I guess
lovely experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. And they were like your mom's age, right? I mean,
She's,
about
a single mom, much older than I was at the time, and it was just a tough experience. I've learned a lot going through. I like to think that I had part to do with the growth that we've had. Certainly not all of it, of course. But there's a few things that kind of jump out. One of them is getting the right people in the right places, and sometimes that means you have to let people go.
Well, and that's a skill set in and of itself.
It is, yeah.
Which we don't have.
No, I very much disliked that. That was I've only had to do it a couple times.
So honorable mention to our lovely sister Brittany Culver,
Yes.
who has built out our team over the years, positioned us for growth because our dad was really good at what he was doing, which is financial advising, but he was horrible at hiring people. He got lucky a few times, but he was bad at that job.
Yeah.
And we aren't skilled for it either. So,
I would say he was worse at firing than he was at hiring.
That might
He just
be
has
true.
a big heart. You hire people and you learn to really like them and love them, and you want them to do well, and so it's hard to let them go. But
well, and they can be fantastic at a different position, right? And it's just having people in the right
sometimes it's
role.
the worst thing for them just to linger at something that is not working out really well.
Right.
So.
Well, and so I mean, as you're going through this progress and goals, and we're growing, and you got to see it earlier than I did because I started coming on in like 2011, 2012. I mean, you saw the pits of the recession at the business and some of the challenges of that. What are some things and stories and growth pains that stick out to you as you're looking back?
Yeah, so I think one of the big turning points for us was when Dad did hand over the hiring and the firing to Brittany. So that was definitely a learning point for us. Getting the right people in the right places, which is always a painful thing when you got to let people go or move people around. And so that was definitely a learning experience. I would say, what we went through these last couple of years going independent and structuring new technologies,
So,
that was also very...
I guess that's a good lesson for the established business owner there, where a lot of businesses I think that are have been around for a long time have maybe hit some walls, and probably due in part to owners or original founders not giving up control. You got to do what you're really good at, and giving up control can lead to that next level.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think giving up control and recognizing where your weaknesses are and hiring people to those weaknesses. I think having good systems and building the foundation for your business early on so that as it grows, it can do that with less growing pains. And so we've been really intentional with our business to have the right technologies in the right places and the right people in the right places. So as we continue to grow, it's more seamless in that, our clients aren't affected by that. They're not knowing that we're growing fast and the struggles are less. Of course, you can never avoid them. Anytime you're growing or not growing, there's going to be struggles.
Yeah, there's always going to be struggles in business. Well, and that's where I think, you probably would, in addition to the technology and having the right people in the right place, is sound business practices is cash is king, right? Cash is a really good asset for businesses to hang on to. and for you to hold on to in your personal finances, it's not necessarily an investment tool. It's a personal finance tool.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think if we learned anything from 2008, if you were in business during that time, you learned that in order to survive, you either have to get lean, you have to have a lot of cash, or a combination of the two. And what we know from economic and market cycles and history is that history does repeat itself. And we went through a tough time in 2008, and we don't know when, and we don't know how tough it's going to be, but we do know there's another tough time coming. And so if you're in business, you always have to be conscious of that. And cash is one of the best ways to protect yourself from those tough times.
Well, and I mean, a lot of times people think about cash and having that set aside just to cover expenses. But a lot of times those tough times are some of the best times to invest.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yes.
and to invest in growing your business. I mean, if you're a business that's doing well and you want to add an additional location, real estate tends to be cheap when things hit a wall, right? I mean, and so if you have cash aside, that's maybe a great time to expand. Maybe that's a great time to redouble your marketing efforts because your competitors are folding. Whatever it may be, cash is not just a tool for covering expenses. It's a cash for expansion.
Absolutely.
It's a tool for expansion.
And during, like you said, during the downtimes, there's the bang for your buck with cash is exceptional.
Exactly.
And the tough part is you don't know when it's coming.
Well,
and so that's
part of being a long-term investor, right?
Sure.
Right? Like, so you can't time when you should have the cash, just like you can't time when you should be in and out of the market. You have to have the cash this year, even though it may be a dead asset for you this year, and next year it may be a dead asset, and the next 5 years it might be a dead asset until it's not. Right. And so there's going to be times where, the international portion of your portfolio is lagging. You can't be the person that says, I'm going to get in and out and in and out because timing it's almost impossible. But, weathering the storm and being a long-term investor with your cash or your investments makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have to recognize that there's good times and there's bad times. And during the good times, you have to store your nuts for the bad times, especially in business.
I love that analogy because I've mentioned this before, but I think I should write a children's book called Savvy the Squirrel. And it's about how he saves his nuts, right? And Savvy the Squirrel is smart because he's saving his nuts for the winter.
There you go. Hey.
I need an artist. If anybody, my listeners are fantastic at drawing like
Savvy the Squirrel,
a very prudent squirrel. I'm looking for that. So you've experimented with some other business avenues too. You've dabbled in some real estate, some rentals, some flips. And talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, those I would say were all learning experiences. What I learned from them, for me personally, I think probably for a lot of people, is that it divided my attention too much. My attention and my focus was better spent on business, what I do best, than it was doing these other things. So I did 2 flips, and I've had a couple rental properties, and now they're gone. I'm no longer doing them. I don't really have interest in doing them. I do have interest in business, and so if opportunities, attractive opportunities present themselves, I'll certainly look at that. But I found the same with my clients. I find that if they have 1 or 2 rental properties, it's a burden more than an investment. If they've got 30 and they've got a person that they know, okay, if this breaks, I'm going to call them and they work for me and they're going to go fix it. It's a business, and you can do really well. And I have clients that have that as well.
So you're not necessarily, even though they weren't the greatest investments you've made, you got your return on investment from maybe the education on it, but
we made money on them, but it just wasn't worth the time and effort and heartache.
Well, yeah, you got to factor that in. Obviously, you're not against it as an asset class like real estate can work, and it does work for a lot of people, but it's a matter of when and who and how, because
and the right mental attitude about it.
Right,
because it is, you kind of. I think a lot of people get into real estate thinking it's a passive investment, and in most situations, it's far from a passive investment.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it as a passive investment. You can buy real estate as in an ETF, right? But you might not get as good of a return as buying a house for $50,000, putting $20,000 into it, and flipping it for $150,000. But then that requires sweat equity, so it's either passive or active, and you might give up some return by handing off those wheels.
Sure.
But you're also gaining your time, and your time is invaluable, particularly if you're a business owner.
And I know for me, really the biggest thing was that I don't do good multitasking. I'm not a great multitasker, and so going through my day working with my clients and doing different things, and then I have to take time out of the day to think about or work on issues with the real estate. It just wasn't working for me. It wasn't, it wasn't what I wanted.
So if you were to do it again and wanted to dip your toe into real estate as an direct investment, would you hire somebody to do all of that for you?
It would have to be a very attractive situation. It would have to be, you know, like another 2008 in that period where it was really attractive. And I don't know. I don't know exactly how I'd handle that. I certainly wouldn't do all the work myself. I'd have to find a system or a process or employees to handle it.
Right. So one thing I haven't talked about a lot on this podcast, and I've really wanted to, and I've debated on having different types of guests on, whether it's attorneys or accountants, is the fundamentals of starting a business. Because I have people ask me a lot about starting a business and different ideas that they have, whether it's to, you know, start a car wash or whatever it may be, how they go about it. So I thought we'd just kind of, because we've done several things together, is let's just talk through the steps of getting a business up and running and started, whether you're manufacturing widgets or whether you're, you know, selling real estate.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on what type of business you're opening, but the first thing you want to do is have a business plan. And I would always recommend taking your business plan to somebody who's already in the industry. Even if you have to geographically go to a different area or pay somebody, you talk to somebody who's already doing what you want to do, is running that business. There's also trade organizations or coaching companies where you can get advice so that you have a solid game plan. And then once you get that down, it's about setting up the right entity. So you need to talk to an accountant and an attorney to figure out whether you need an LLC, a sole proprietorship, a corporation.
So, I mean, that LLC seems to be the go-to.
Sure.
Now, you can file an LLC with the state without an attorney. Would you, can you talk about the pro? I mean, you're going to save a couple $100 by doing that. Would you just advise a person just to suck it up and pay the attorney to file the LLC?
Absolutely. I've done several myself. I've always used an attorney. So technically, you need an operating agreement. There's I's that need dotted and T's that need crossed, and you don't know what you don't know. So until you get your specific business in front of you, a lot of times an attorney will discuss certain pieces of liability you may not have thought of in that type of business, and extra documents that need drawn. You also, from a tax standpoint, there may be benefits with the type of business that you're doing to have it structured, because an LLC can be structured a few different ways.
Well, I guess, you know, an LLC just stands for limited liability company, and it basically just creates a company that is separate from you. It separates the assets to a certain degree to cover you from liability, right? Your widget causes somebody to trip and fall, and they sue the company. At least they can't get your house out of it as long as things are set up properly, right?
Correct. Yep.
And so then you take the LLC. So an LLC is simply a means of protecting you from liability. You then have to decide how it's going to be taxed, and you know, from whether it's going to be taxed as a partnership or an S corp or however that's going to be structured. And that's where you actually need more advice, I would argue, because it's not about where you are today. The income and how it's being taxed doesn't matter nearly as much today when you're starting up from ground one. But when you grow your business and it becomes successful, it's harder to change stuff.
Yeah, I think you need to, I mean, you don't know how fast your business is going to grow or how well it's going to do, but you need to think about those things going forward, and how much revenue you're going to have, and you know, what the inflows and outflows are going to look like, and it may make sense to structure your business differently from a tax standpoint based on that. So yeah, I mean, it gets more complicated certainly when you get into the tax side of things.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, we rely on our I don't know how many tax classes both of us have taken combined, a lot, but we still rely on our accountant when it comes time to open a business or do something different. We always are talking to them.
I tell clients that all the time. It's like, I'm qualified enough to do my own tax return, but I won't do it. I mean, why? You know, for a personal tax return, it's pretty inexpensive to get it done, even by a CPA. Right. I mean, it's not
in the grand scheme of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and you're going to spend hours and hours doing it. And so why? I mean, even if you're qualified to do it.
Yeah. And, you know, and if you don't do taxes every day, just like if you don't do investments every day, there's certain things you're going to miss when you do, even if you're very knowledgeable.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we're a sales pitch for accountants right now, which we're not. But, you know, I think those are all practical pieces of information. One thing I wanted to kind of talk to people, because I have a lot of entrepreneurial-minded people that listen, is saving for retirement particularly can be difficult or challenging when you're a business owner, right?
Absolutely.
Especially smaller business owners that are, you know, sub 50 employees. I mean, let's chat about that for a minute. Because to me, the biggest thing for a business owner is making sure that they have sufficient liquid assets, and then making sure even that their retirement assets can be used for opportunities if those arise.
Sure. Yeah. So I completely agree with that. I think that when you're looking at a business and as it gets more successful, a lot of business owners, the tendency is to reinvest back into the business. That's what's built your wealth. That's what you want to keep building your wealth. But the fact of the matter is there's all sorts of things that are outside of our control. You have an employee that does something wrong and you get sued and the company goes under. Could be regulatory changes, whatever it may be. Your
regulatory one, I think, speaks to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
or if you look at a lot of suppliers for like General Motors being in the area that we're in,
yeah,
they really didn't have much. There's nothing much they could have done to keep their businesses intact. It just was the economy.
Well, yeah,
what happened.
GM goes bankrupt, and 97% of your sales are the knobs on the radio switch in GM's vehicles. Right, you're screwed.
And so my point with that is that it is wise as you start making money in your business to start siphoning off or pulling off some of that to put in your own personal name, so that you have assets, so that if business goes awry for whatever reason, or you start to struggle or whatever happens, now you have something for your future. You have something for your retirement, for your kids, whatever it may be. It's just a wise thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do for people who are passionate about their business.
Yeah, that's the because I think there's a sense of control of how the money's being spent, right? So if you take a person that's owned a business for 30 years and they've built it from nothing to something successful that's providing for their family and their employees' families, to then tell them we should take X percentage of your income, and instead of putting that towards growth and development, which we're not saying you should stop doing that, we should put that into something else, insulating yourself. Now you're just you might be investing in other companies, and that can be a hard thing to swallow. And my thing with that is when you own a business, what you own is a micro cap company, right? And so you have, when we've talked about this a lot before on the podcast, micro cap companies, small cap companies, medium cap companies, and large cap companies. If you own a business that's less than $300 million in value, it's a micro cap company.
Small, yeah.
And so if 80-90% of your assets are in a micro cap company, face of it says that's really high risk. Right.
But you get the illusion of lower risk because you have some control over it.
Right.
Which is true. That's a lot of people that have successful businesses. They got there because they take control and they do it, and they don't want to release that control. But
and I'd argue one of the difficult things with it is if you own a business, the harder you work generally, the more successful you're going to be. Right?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you put in the hours, and in most things in life, the harder you work, you're going to be better at. So whether it's, if you're a football player, you're going to be better off by going and putting in the off-season work in the gym or on the pavement than you are by not, right? And when you start investing outside of your business, whether it's just buying, the market or passive real estate or whatever it may be, odds are you need to work less hard on it, right? Like if you work super hard on researching stocks, you're probably not going to do any better than the guy that sits on his couch and buys S&P 500 index fund, statistically speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, you're going to do significantly worse, statistically
Very
speaking.
likely, yes.
So not only are you handing off the control, you're handing off a workload, and that seems counterintuitive.
Right.
So that can be challenging. So the beer, you haven't drank nearly as much of it as I have.
Well, that's pretty typical.
Touche. I love having guests because I actually get to drink the beer. When it's just me, I don't. But you have the privilege of being the first.
You force your listeners to listen to just you?
I do. Often, really. Often. Too often. I should have guests more often. So, but you have the privilege of being the first person at my new setup here. We have a new table and chairs.
Very nice.
It's a high top, kind of like a bar. High top, right? Which goes with it. It's not prosperity by the milk glass, but it's prosperity by the pie. But thanks for coming on, Brandon. This was fun.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Episode 44, Prosperity by the Pint. Don't forget to follow us, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, wherever you are. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.